I'm joined by Joshua Sanabria, CEO of GoArchitect. Joshua, how are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Can you please start with what exactly is GoArchitect?
Yeah, so GoArchitect is a urban planning and technology company. So we started in 2018, and basically we work with a lot of school districts and a lot of kind of government offices to help them do planning of facilities, capital expenditures, all that kind of stuff where hopefully we are making cities and schools and things like that better. So we have worked with projects that add up to the billions.
That's
For
cool. Okay.
example, with a school district that has, 20 schools, you can imagine how many buildings and things like that are at each of those schools. So we work with, you know, some big data, so to speak, on the finance and enrollment and data around all the students and facilities and things like that. So yeah, it gets
Awesome.
big pretty fast, but I wish we were worth billions. That would be great.
Yeah, right. And so another question I have is, are you venture capitalist funded? Are you just privately owned? Just want to just find out a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no venture funding. Basically, I
That's
had
awesome.
worked
Okay.
in some corporate architecture firms and then, got involved with this world and was also doing software programming, things like that. And just one thing led to another, and 2018 was the right time to try to go out on our own. And so took a leap. Very fortunately, one of the companies I used to work for actually became our client. So yeah, no venture funding, all bootstrapped from the ground up, old fashioned.
I I commend you. That is, you don't hear that, right? Like, and that's exactly how I started. I am, if I don't make money, I don't eat, right? There isn't somebody I can call and just get, oh yeah, can I just get more money and blah blah blah. And that's always what I've always thought was Achilles' heel of venture capitalists, because the problem with that is you don't get
Mm,
rated on if you get enough money. It's almost like you just grow and grow and grow, and there's these benchmarks you have, but they are not profitable related, right? It's almost like you go to the
sure.
next series, you go to the next series, and you go to the next series, and ABC funding, and you just keep going down the alphabet. But the
Yeah.
problem is profitability isn't necessarily one of the key performance indicators. So
Yeah.
I commend you being a startup that's actually doing that, and that's actually working with small governments, et cetera, or government in general. um,
Yeah.
so so you started in that's pre-COVID, it sounds like.
Yeah. Actually, it was fine. Um, I think there was a couple of things. So, for one, our clients, like I said, are mostly school districts, and we'll just say government as a general entity. And government pretty much just kept going. People still need to go to school, even if they're not physically in the building, those buildings still exist. And of course, it was actually a good time for people to be planning ahead because the buildings were emptier or empty entirely. And so it's a good time to plan ahead, which is literally what we do, is planning for like the next 10, 20 years of developments at different campuses. So that was pretty much smooth. And then on a kind of experimental side, so the business has also GoArchitect has also tried a few different things. We tried like publishing books. We tried producing online classes. So 2020 was actually a very productive year because we were just at home doing stuff, trying things out, not necessarily getting distracted by regular life. So yeah, actually 2020 was pretty productive. Maybe a little boring in a social and personal sense, but from a work sense, it was fine actually. It was great.
Got it. So
Yeah.
so let's take a step back in terms of the startup here, right? Because and really
Yeah.
it's awesome you're still continuing this journey. Most businesses, let's be honest, just don't make it past that first year, let alone
Sure.
the second year.
Yeah.
But one thing I've noticed is there was a phrase, I should know this phrase. It's with comedians, and
Mm.
for all things comedians, and what's it called? It's a weird name, but it's it's basically if you're a comedian and
Hmm.
you're networking, you're doing gigs for, let's say, 6 months, maybe 3 months. Let's
Okay.
say 3 months. You're networking. Then if you can make it to that 3 month period, you can make it to 6 months, right? If you make it to
Mm.
6 months, you can make it to a year. And in that
Yeah.
whole time, you're fostering those leads, you're going to different bars, you're going to different whatever clubs like Jay Leno, something like that. And then
Yeah.
if you make it that
Yeah. Yeah.
first year, make it the second year. Make it 2 years, you make it 4 years, right? And it kind of seems
Sure.
that's what you did, and that's kind of what I did because I started I'm definitely post pandemic. That's for sure. Going is almost like a survival or leads. I should say that's where I'm going with this leads.
Yeah.
So I imagine something like this is a extremely long tail lead, right? I would say you're longer than real estate. Like you're actually more than like corporate real estate even. So how do you define that lead process, and
Yeah.
how do you seed it? How do you bring those leads in? Because you're talking about, like you said, right? Decades ahead of player planning and decades.
Well, I mean, in general, architecture, just as an industry, has a longer lead time. People don't necessarily just wake up and decide to build something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just have to kind of be used to it in general. Um, from a GoArchitect sense, we do have to balance the long and the short term. So we have a lot of other firms and offices that we partner with. And a lot of times we are partners on a project rather than us being the solo entity or solo, contractor or something. We're part of a team already. So it's been less about trying to go out and find every single potential company. And it's been more about developing good partnerships with other larger firms who have better brand power, more people, better political connections, things like that. So I would say it's more about partnership. And then to kind of go along with that, we also design software. So one of the things that we just created is an app called Engage, which we can get into a little bit later. But Engage is a tool that came out of issues that we've noticed with projects. And now Engage is a standalone product, a SaaS product where people can, sign up and have a month to month or year subscription. So that's kind of the immediate income while we also have these long-term partnerships and projects and things like that that take, multiple years to finish or last at least for multiple years. Yeah.
Tech is a tough nut right now, right? It's a it's
Yeah.
a tough vertical right now in general.
Sure.
And I think I think when the money was flowing, and that's actually where I was talking about earlier, venture funds, stuff like this. It's great to seed it and to
Yeah.
fund something like that. You are not a venture capitalist, so I mean, this
Yeah.
is just a cool model here. So that's why I'm very excited on this, because how on earth do you fund like that's just amazing, because you have your core business, right? You have your long-term business, you have
Yeah.
your tech business, but you built this you built this tech. How did you get from that loss leader, from just
Yeah.
dumping all this money into tech, to making it profitable so much that you can make money off it off the short run? Because that's,
Yeah.
my friend, that's magic. I don't see you going. I mean, I'm sure you've been to Silicon Valley. I'm sure you've had those conversations, but how did you make it happen without venture capitalist money? That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing.
Well, I think what helps is that it's a product that we knew that we had a need for. So we made it to very literally solve the issues that we were already facing. So, for example, with the school district projects, we do a lot of community outreach. And that can mean, like old school way, is you set up a meeting with all of the teachers and parents at a school, you drive out there, you print boards or have a PowerPoint or something on the screen, and you physically in person do these community meetings. Now, maybe you can do like a Google Forms type of thing where you just send them a survey, but you miss out on a lot of the tactile aspects of community engagement. So for example, doing like sticky notes where you can like place the sticky notes on a, board. That's not really possible with any, or it wasn't possible with any tool. So we wanted to create something that took that in-person tactile feedback format of sticky notes, for example, and digitized it. And so because we knew that we could use that tool for projects, we could justify saying, okay, we're going to dedicate, a couple $1,000 a month for, hiring a developer and making this happen, pitching it back to our existing partners and clients and saying, hey, this tool can save you money because we no longer have to go in person and do all these meetings. We can subsidize it with this application. So it was kind of a thing where we saw the need. Fortunately, the long-term business is doing well, and so we physically had the money to, hire developers and things like that to make the app. And then it helps that I also have app making experience, so I'm part of that, engineering team. And then, just to be frank, right, the Engage does not break even on its own. Right now, it still serves the planning side of the business, the old school side of the business. But I could see a path where it does, and that's where we are right now, trying to get it out into the world beyond just the immediate clients that we have.
Absolutely. No, I think, but the fact you build. I mean, when I think of an application, when I think of a SaaS product, I think of a man. I just think of a black hole, right? And it's just like it goes and it goes and it goes, right? The fact,
Sure.
even, I mean, whether or not it's making a tremendous profit, some profit, or it's still under, it's okay, because I think there's a couple things. You're able to take that product and keep it as part of your value propositions when you go to clients, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, when you're going to these clients and you're saying, we have this vision, we do this planning process, we want to plan out all, these series of buildings in this location. We also have this, amazing tech that we integrate with, that puts this whole process on steroids. That, I mean, that's just a value prop you're able to inject into the process, that you're able to
Yeah.
make the sale, right? I hate to say it like that. I cannot stand. I mean, being being a CEO. I mean, that's I didn't sell before this, but I sure now. So it's so I think any CEO understands that part.
Yeah.
So in effect, I mean, it is contributing to your bottom line. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've dabbled with stuff like that. The problem with my with my industry, it's all been done. Paid search and social. There's Sprout. I can literally name off a trillion apps that are out there
Yeah.
right now.
Big space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now let's kind of dial it back even more a bit. So you're
Sure.
talking about B2B, right?
Yeah.
And B2B it's definitely far different than D2C. Here is a qualifications when you go and look for a partnership or look to make a bid, right? Now
Hmm.
with these government entities, is it bidding, or do you partner with these architecture firms, and then they have just, can you explain that?
So it depends what the entity is. If you work, like I live in Chicago, if you want to go and work with the city of Chicago, they have a online directory of all of the projects that are being put out for bid in all kinds of departments. You could It could literally be, mowing the grass in a particular park and being a contractor for landscaping, all the way to designing a, new building or whatever. So you can look at those directories and, bid or apply to bid for those projects. With school districts, kind of similar. They put out an RFP, or request for a proposal, and then you would respond to that RFP. So it's relatively democratic, let's say. Everyone who pays attention, or at least is looking for it, should know that the job exists or that the project exists. Now, of course, you have to submit your proposal to that RFP, and they obviously have certain requirements, but yeah, it's a pretty democratic process. In our case, we, like I said before, we work a lot with partners who are also on that proposal, so we're by no means the only name on there. And that does a lot of things. A lot of times projects are complicated, so we're only working on one section of the project, but there are other people that do other things. So really, the partnerships it's not only an important part, it's an essential part. We wouldn't even be qualified to go after the entire project without the partners. And that applies to the master planning projects, and then in a way, it trickles down to the software. Now, technically, anyone can use Engage, but at least right now, it's mostly used by people that work on similar projects as we do.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that takes us to, it kind of takes me to something else as well, right? And that's like your product differentiation, right? So like, let's take me. So my bread and butter, my superpower is paid search and social. That's what I do all day long. And am I a creative guy? I little, not really. Am I SEO guy? Search engine optimization, a little, not really. But one thing I noticed is there's only so many jobs I can get with paid search and social, right? Or one thing that happens that really is something that any CEO or any founder will know, whether they're a company of one or a company of five like me, or a larger company like you, is that eventually you start hearing your clients saying, well, do you offer SEO? Do you offer creative? Do you offer email marketing? Do you offer something else? And then you're like, well, no. And then they're like, well, okay, and then you kind of give that opening to someone else, right? And they're like, well, I know this friend that does it, and you just hope that friend doesn't steal your business, right? And or because you actually want to refer it, because you don't want this client to go out the door with some kind of larger partnership. So the one thing this last, I'd say 12 months, is open it up to exactly those different disciplines, right? So we now offer SEO, we now offer email marketing, we now offer site optimization, site design, both front end and back end. So I guess my question is, right, like I know you fill this amazing niche and you're able to really own it, right? You're able to kind of speak to or network yourself, obviously, because you've been in architecture circles and you know architecture. Have you ever thought about opening it up to, say, steel erection services or drafting, going down those different areas? And I don't know your industry; you own it far more than me. But has that something that's come up? I'm sure it has. Just curious.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that might prevent you from just doing anything. For example, we would not be qualified to be an engineering firm because we don't have any licensed engineers, for example. So there are some legal barriers that provide guidance. Now, within different paths, you can say, well, okay, I'm a licensed, let's say I'm a licensed architect, but I've only worked on houses. Well, you're probably not going to be hired to build a hospital. Even though you're technically licensed for the same thing, there's not going to be, you're unlikely to find somebody that trusts you to build a skyscraper or a hospital or something if you've only worked on houses. So it kind of functions as practical barriers, even though there's no legal barriers, because the level of entry is high. So in our case, what we've been doing is we have this niche. There are maybe some legal and just practical protections around this niche, but we want to try to benefit everyone within that. And government and education in the United States is a massive, massive industry and business, and it changes from state to state, and it changes sometimes from zip code to zip code. So even if you theoretically have done the same project in California, it may not be the same procedure in Texas, for example, because they just have different laws. So I think to a certain extent that has kept us kind of naturally confined where we can own something. And then within that, there's a lot to be done. So, for example, like the community outreach part, a traditional architecture firm may not really do community outreach in general. They may just do the drafting and the design and the, city planning or the city submittals, but they don't necessarily always have the people, the expertise to go out and do community engagement. But meanwhile, that is something that we offer. And then we even leveled up on that by creating software to make, community engagement even better. So it's kind of like there's enough room within the area that we work with where you can explore a lot. And there are even other options that we don't touch. For example, we don't do anything with finance, but like a theoretical future iteration could be that we partner with banks to help organizations do bond fundraising and raise money. Like that's a theoretical avenue that we can go into if maybe we hired some extra people and really pursued it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's
Okay.
a great answer, because what I think you're saying here um, is there's so many different sub niches within this that you've really haven't
Yeah.
maxed out, right? Like you've really, so you're
No, by no
still,
means. Yeah.
yeah, so exactly. So that's actually amazing. And what I think is really cool is you probably, like you said, you've identified certain sectors that maybe long term down the road you may go after, but the fact you haven't niched out, right? You haven't capped, right? You're
Yeah.
not fully saturated. That's awesome. And then what I love about this is the fact that you've identified these markers, you've identified these niches, but once you identify all those niches, right, and all these different, you've mastered community management, you've done all these things that
Hmm.
you're going to be the lead, like you're going to be it, right? Like I imagine once you fill all that out, now are there other people doing the same thing? I don't know. I'm not in your niche, or
Yeah.
you're not in your sector. I know Brad
Yeah.
Pitt's a big architecture guy. I do know that. So yeah, I think yeah, he's big into it. He actually designed some stuff in Los Feliz, which is in Hollywood by me. The fact that you've really identified these different silos and have not. You totally said, like, I like what you said. We haven't maxed out there. I think is great, and I think once you do, yeah, eventually you will. If you're as smart as you are, I think you're going to be the leader in that particular space. That's what I imagine
Mhm.
is the long term goal, right? Um,
Hopefully. Yeah.
yeah. So the next question, let's talk about. So we identified the process. We have identified certain other angles of a business. We have identified
Hmm.
longevity. Let's talk about competitors, right?
Yeah.
So in regards to competitors, how have you handled that? Because government contracts are they're those are huge right now, right? And a down economy, that's where people look to, right? They're looking to these larger government contracts, these awesome relationships. How do you do okay, so if I'm an architectural firm, I'm sure I've
Yeah.
semi heard of you, right? Because like you said, it's a certain niche. How do you do that amazing outreach to say, we want to partner with you? Like, what's
Yeah.
that process like?
Yeah. I think the first thing is that we don't really compete with anyone. So, in the sense that I'm not trying to overtly compete with any particular group or firm. We've structured our partnerships in a way where we are part of a team that applies to the project. And every member on that team plays a particular role. And maybe there's some overlap here and there occasionally, but in general, everyone has a particular role. And so we are not alone. It's not like I only have one option and the only option is if I win the project. So, you know, there's kind of that benefit in that we are focused on partnership rather than projects, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then, from a long-term standpoint, if our competitors, or let's say every other firm that, does community outreach, saw the value in Engage and started to use it, and they use it on projects that they won and we didn't, even that would make me happy, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're basically trying to be as informative and helpful and active in our area as possible. And so I don't know if most firms have heard of this. There is a good chance, especially as we kind of go through the cycles, and we're now working on our 20th master plan. So that's a pretty decent number where people may have come across our work, and we put our logo in the bottom right of all of the online assets that we create, for example. So it's conceivable. But I think long term, I want people to use the tools that we make, whether they work with us directly or not. And then from a consulting service side, I want to partner with as many people as possible because, have you ever heard of the concept of like blue ocean, red ocean?
Oh yeah. The competition stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
There's
Can you
no
explain it?
point in
Can you explain it real quick? I'm sorry. Would you mind just highlighting it real quick? Go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, so the loose concept is that competition is actually bad because the more you are competing with somebody, you are, in many likelihood, you are driving down the price as part of your competition, or you're maybe driving down the quality to compete, but you're creating this red ocean or a lot of blood in the water where you are killing each other's products
Yeah.
to gain the customer. But in a blue ocean, there is enough space, or there's enough kind of room in your market where you can define your product differently, where you really aren't competing with anyone directly. You are enjoying the space of your ocean or your market. And so that's what we've tried to do. We're not competing with other architecture firms on new buildings. We're not, trying to outbid people. We are literally just trying to partner with as many people as possible and create the tools that as many of those potential partners can use.
You know what? I think that is brilliant because that's one thing, right? That I if you had to take my total like pie of clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Half of them, half of them are partnering with larger agencies right now. They just have the clients, they have the larger clients, and they're like, hey, I offer all these other services, or I do TV buying, but I don't have a digital component. I have a page search and social component, and they
Sure.
somehow either through the power of this YouTube channel or the power of the forums or whatever it is, somehow I just get these random RFPs on Upwork too. I'm on Upwork as well, and
Mm.
just randomly I just get, I think more or less it's this channel, but I just randomly just get these referrals. I would say
Yeah.
it's even more than that. I'd say it's probably 60% of my business
Yeah.
is partnerships. So I think the fact that a lot of people think about what I do, they're like, okay, so you just go after clients all day. You just go after clients. And yeah, of course I do. I mean, I'm not, that's exactly the name of the game. But
Sure.
the other game is really like you just said, networking, trying to help, really trying to help other larger businesses fill that gap, partnering with
Yeah.
them, making sure that my added value becomes a larger added value for them, that they're able to offer my services. And
Yeah.
that's been very fruitful. That's been very, very fruitful. Any other things you want to say about GoArchitect that we haven't touched on?
um, well, We did. We are trying to get the word out about Engage, so it is free to use. People can sign up. It's engagebygo.com. People can check it out, do some sticky note surveys, see how it works. But yeah, just thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'll include the link below. Thank
Great.
you, everybody, for joining this amazing conversation. Thank you, Joshua, for
Of course.
attending. I know you guys are hosting the Democratic Convention very soon. I think it's this month, actually, in
Yeah,
July.
it's coming
We'll
up.
see what happens. Thank you for joining us, and
Yeah, of
thank you, everybody,
course.
for listening.
You have a great evening.